Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Katrina Murphy here, Deputy News Editor with the Irish Farmers Journal, and welcome to this week's podcast. This week, the Department of Agriculture and Board Bia set off on a trade mission to the Gulf states of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates for some good old-fashioned networking on behalf of Irish farmers. The wins came early in the trip, with enhanced access for Irish beef announced in Saudi Arabia and fresh hopes that Irish sheep meat could follow suit. News editor Patrick Donoghue is on the mission, and he sat down with Agriculture Minister Michael Creed to discuss the benefits of trade missions such as this one for Irish farmers.
Minister, we're on the second leg of the trade mission to the Gulf states. Start on Saturday. You've been through Saudi Arabia with some good news on beef and potentially on sheep meat. What has the week been for you so far with just a couple of days left to go?
Well, it has been rewarding. I think these missions are they present different deliverables. Obviously, we had in the context of beef to Saudi a significant win. But as farmers will understand, you know, sometimes you harvest after a long period of endeavour. And what we're doing here in the UAE is, you know, making contacts, opening doors, building relationships, seeking out opportunities. We've over 20 food companies at the Gulf Food Fair. We have a large number of ag tech companies, opening doors for them, making introductions for them to big major players here. And I think the dividend from that may be in 6 months and maybe in 12 months. But this is part of what the department does in terms of its market access unit. It's part of what it does with Board B in terms of the promotion side. And I think, you know, the contacts we've made, the invitations that we've issued, which have been accepted by various authorities here to visit Ireland, to explore opportunities with our research section, with the Sustainable Food Systems Ireland, which houses all of the technology that we have built up over several years, to visit our research, visit Teagasc. I think will certainly yield a harvest in due course.
And that's exactly where we lead in. We lead in perfectly. Farmers can sometimes maybe don't see the benefit of packing up 50 people heading off to places that they may never be themselves. What is the benefit from your point of view on that?
Well, the benefit is very clear. I mean, we export 90% of what we produce. So we're constantly out there opening doors. Sometimes the industry walks in the week after the door is opened. Sometimes the industry may be getting a better return somewhere else and may say, listen, that's not for me this week, this month. But I'll give you one very good example. The Russian ban closed the door on us for pork export some time ago. And because of the endeavour of trade missions, we had another door open in China. And very quickly, China has now become the second biggest destination for not just our pork exports, but also our second biggest destination for our dairy exports. Mm-hmm. And that's what having a variety of doors opening delivers. It's not that we're going to sell into all the markets we open. It's actually that, you know, if a market goes down in price, you can explore another market opportunity. And that's what we're at.
So it's just a year since you were re-elected and probably 10 months or so since you've been Minister for Agriculture. Would you be here, and you've done your third trade mission, now you're on your third trade mission, would you have done three in the context of the British electorate not voting to leave Europe?
Well, I think it has taken on an added urgency. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we're 40% approximately exposed to the UK market, and nobody really knows, if they're honest, nobody knows where this debacle of Brexit is going to end up. Obviously, we're fighting as effectively as we can to safeguard our market access there, because it is, apart from being geographically and historically understandable that we're there, it's the most lucrative market for us, particularly in the beef side. So, trade missions take on an added urgency in that context, there's no doubt about it, and that's why we are intensifying our efforts in terms of new market opportunities.
Do you have a picture where you'll be more in 2017?
Well, we're looking at, I mean, the places we're travelling to are identified in Foodwise 2025 as the hotspots of opportunity. So they are Southeast Asia, they are the Middle East, North Africa. We're looking at places like Iran, we're looking at Egypt in terms of live exports in particular, and beef opportunities. So they are really, I think, where the concentration will be. Japan has potential on the beef side. There are some opportunities from CETA believe it or not, on the Canadian side, and certainly I think 2017 will see some increased activity on the American beef side as well.
On the prime cuts, I presume?
No, I would imagine on the beef for grinding. I think actually we may begin to get volumes moving there. I'm not sure how significant it will be, but I think that might commence in 2017. That's assuming the great imponderable in the White House doesn't close America down to the external trade.
So when you're here in 12 months' time, and assuming you're still Minister for Agriculture, what
big assumptions?
What would be a successful return 12 months on from the trade mission that we're currently on?
I think, look, in truth, these are all measured on the value of exports. And I would be disappointed if the value of exports to the UAE and Saudi isn't increased significantly.
Across dairy and beef?
Across dairy and beef.
And just talk to us a bit about the sheep meat, because the UAE or Saudi in particular were proactive on that, wanting the Department of Agriculture in Ireland to get involved on.
Yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. They did invite us and gave us a bit of a roadmap as to how to progress the issue. The interesting thing, though, they're interested more in a grain-fed finished sheep product, which isn't exactly where our product is now. If the volume was significant, I'm sure the sheep farming community could meet that specific demand. But there's huge opportunity in sheep meat in this market here in the UAE as well. So, and we don't have access issues at the moment. So, we'll see where that leads to. We will open the door, I'm sure, on Saudi. But I'm not sure, given the fact that we have other markets open, particularly Iran last year for sheep meat, that the maximum return might be in that market for us.
Does Brexit keep you awake at night?
Yes.
And so as a result, is there enough being done by the leader of the government, i.e. An Taoiseach, and yourself, probably the most exposed department within the government to it?
Well, there's no probable about it. We are really in the firing line. And has the government done enough? I think the government has done everything that it possibly can. And I think, in fairness, the industry acknowledges that. And I've had extensive consultations with all of the sectors within the dairy: red meat, poultry, pork, cereals, dairy, forestry, fisheries. I've had, sectoral dialogues with all of them. And I hear the noise, saying we're not prepared enough. I hear, the commentary, we should have a minister for Brexit, etc. I think anybody who has engaged seriously knows the complexity of it, knows that this concept of a minister for Brexit is nonsense. This is a whole of government issue, and in fairness to the Taoiseach, he has led from the front on it. I mean, the negotiators take their instructions from the Council in the European Union. That's the heads of state. We've put enormous efforts into creating the political awareness of our unique situation. I've done it at Council of Agriculture Ministers. But every other minister across government has Brexit issues. So the idea that one minister could take all this on whilst the rest of us happily get on with the rest of what we're doing is a nonsense. I mean, there are 3,000 employees in my department. Every one of them is preoccupied with Brexit. It's an entire Brexit operation in my department.
And finally, tillage and tillage crisis fund. Will you be dipping your hand into your pocket to deliver for the couple of hundred farmers or 300 farmers who were affected by the last year's harvest?
Well, what I've committed to is engagement with the IFA on this matter, and that's ongoing. And what I've said clearly is, where there's a way, there's a will.
Okay. Minister, live from the UAE, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app, and on iTunes every Thursday.
Patrick then sat down with Board Bia's new CEO, Tara McCarthy, to ask her about her feelings on the trade mission so far and about the role Board Bia plays in spreading the positive news about Irish food abroad.
Tara McCarthy, Board Bia Chief Executive. We're speaking in Abu Dhabi, this midway through the trade mission to the Gulf States. What has been your experience as your first one as CEO, and what are you hoping to get out of it, and what do you want to get out of it over the next couple of days?
It's been a very hectic experience. It's been a very tiring one, but an exciting one, to be honest, and we're just halfway through it. So you prep an awful lot before you come on a visit like this, understanding the market, understanding the dynamics, reading through all of the briefings on it, but actually nothing compares to seeing it in person. So it's been an extraordinary experience as you see for the first time in your life Saudi and how that market works. You've read every consumer insight they've handed to you beforehand. You've read all of the trade structure. Seeing it in real life has been a phenomenal experience. Meeting the people behind the stats and the facts and figures has been just as informative, because you get the mood music behind all of the work that you're doing. You understand where the challenges are much better when they're explained from that person's perspective, and you really appreciate the culture of the place then. So that's what I've been learning. What I've been doing in that period is telling the story. And what we're really trying to get better at as we go through the week is telling the story of Ireland, telling the reason why this is so exciting, telling the work that's gone into this story, telling the transformation that's happened in Ireland in the last 5 years, and making people care about that.
You've already had a couple of decent wins. You know, there's been the access on beef, and then Board B has announced that there could be some Saudi buyers coming over in recent times or in close times to Ireland. Bit of access on the sheep meat. How enthusing is it and heartening to see wins so early on in a trade mission like this?
It's fantastic, because it actually starts giving you the results and the motivation to keep going on things. That if you feel you're going into a cul-de-sac with regard to the work that you're doing, it is a challenge. And everybody, whether you're on the farm or whether you're in a processing factory, when you feel a project isn't working, it is a demotivating thing. But when you actually see the stars align in front of you and that you're ready for the next phase and you know it'll get bigger and better, then everybody within the team, whether that's on the ministerial level or on the Board B piece, realises there's just more work to get done, and that's a fantastic feeling.
How does this fit into to your vision? You know, you are only a month officially, with feet under the table. What is your vision?
We have a strategy in Board BA, and that strategy was agreed when I was in the organisation previously, and then it was culminated with Aidan Cotter as the Chief Executive. It's got 5 key points to it, and I agree and I sign up to every single one of those 5 key points. And those 5 key points are around understanding the market, that's what we're here to do today. It's underpinning by consumer insight. It's also then talking about the infrastructure and the talent, and that's the Origin Green ambassadors, that's their office network, that's the fellows we keep working with. It's then working with Origin Green and communicating and telling the story to make Origin Green the best it can be. And you can get the feedback from the market as to the interest when you tell that story and you tell them about the 176,000 carbon assessments we've done. When you talk to them about the fact that 17,000 dairy farmers have signed up to that, you know you're making an impact in telling that story. And then it's all around accessing the market, because with those 3 tools in your kit, you can access and start converting business in those markets, which is what we're seeing is the result of just these first 2 to 3 days. And then the final piece of our strategy is telling that story, which is what I've been doing out here. So at every opportunity, at every networking event, we've built an opportunity for the Minister to lead with the introductions from a policy perspective, from the full department perspective, and then we've created an opportunity to tell the story of the Irish food industry and how that's transformed.
12 months from now, when you'll be feet well under the table at that stage, what will be a successful return for you from this trade mission to look back and say, yeah, we got that right?
Success would be writing new business in the market, having new buyers coming in. We'll have Marketplace in 2018. I'd love to see a substantial group coming in from this part of the world, and those people coming in to appreciate even further the Origin Green story.
Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
This week, the Joint Oireachtas Agriculture Committee launched a report on the impact of Brexit on the Irish agri-food and fisheries sectors. The report calls for a revision of Foodwise 2025 targets by questioning the viability of beef and dairy expansion, and considers the role of biofuels, with a recommendation that they are encouraged and promoted. Pat O'Toole, Irish Farmers Journal news correspondent, was at the launch, and he spoke to Ag Committee Chairman Pat Deering.
And when we were analysing the report, it's worst case scenario. In your opinion, what do you think is the most realistic assessment of where we are at the moment in realpolitik terms, setting aside the worst case scenario, which is a prudent approach to take, but what's your read of where we actually are at this moment in time, with elections in the north, with I suppose a hiatus in terms of what Britain is going to do, and very little focus on agriculture coming from Britain towards Europe, whatever about from Europe towards Britain. What's your read?
I suppose you're right in your initial assessment, Pat, as regards the English situation, and I still don't think that Great Britain know what they want. I suppose where we are at the moment, I think if we can get an agreement within a 2-year time span, I think it's crucial. But I don't think it's possible. And once we go beyond the 2 years, and I think, as we mentioned in the report, one of the recommendations in the report, that if it goes beyond the 2 years, I think we should look for an extension in that regard. Because if we don't, we're going to be into world trade negotiations, and that is very, very complicated. We're into tariffs and so on and so forth, and that's not what we want. But where we are at the moment, I do think there is a realisation around Europe that obviously we have difficulties, and I think that has been accepted by the vast majority. But that has to transfer into actual support when the time comes, and we're only weeks away now at this stage from the actual time arriving. But I would hope that support will arrive. We had met, and I met myself here, a group from France, and we had a group who were quite supportive of our stance. I do think that there's a group, the whole British thing is very fluid. The Welsh farmers, or there's a group from Wales here recently who are totally oblivious of what is going on, who cannot understand exactly how they ended up in the situation they're in. Northern Ireland farmers, likewise, even though the vast majority of them vote to leave. But when they're dependent on 87% of their income coming from Europe, I think they're in for a bit of a shock.
In terms of how Brussels sees things right now, the intensity of the focus that we have here in the media and here in the Oireachtas and you as a committee, do you get the sense that Europe is as urgent, specifically in relation to agriculture and Brexit, as Ireland is?
Possibly. I think they're beginning to get it now. I think up to now it has been slow. I think we were well ahead of the Pacific over as such, Pat, because of obviously our close relations with Great Britain, and the fact that we were obviously going to be in the firing line more so than anybody else. And I think at this stage now Europe are beginning to get it, but I think they have been slow getting off the mark. That's a personal opinion from listening to what has been going on. I think they've been slow about getting off the mark, but I think with the wheeling and dealing, if I could put it as such, and that has gone on between the ministers, especially the Minister of Agriculture, in the last number of months, I think that has helped. But at this stage I think we're beginning to get there.
The report will surprise some people who mightn't have realised the extent of the two-way relationship in terms of trade. Like it identifies that Ireland is Britain's biggest export market. Yeah. That wouldn't be commonly understood. I would imagine a huge proportion of that is coming from Northern Ireland, and like the position of Northern Ireland once the new government is in place, I would imagine that your committee will be looking to accelerate talks, because while there's Britain and Ireland and there's Britain and Europe, then the Northern Ireland leg of the stool, I suppose, is hugely important, and that internal dialogue on this island.
Absolutely, that's one of our key findings, that the dialogue between Northern Ireland will have to intensify once the new government is in place up there. I suppose of all between ourselves, Northern Ireland and Great Britain, Northern Ireland potentially has the most to lose at this stage, unfortunately, from their point of view, and they have been to a certain extent excluded from the conversation because of the way things have worked out in Great Britain. And I would see a greater conversation developing over the next number of months, and hopefully that they can get moving as regards formation of government in the north after next week. And I think it would be important from all our points of view that conversation would begin straight away.
Finally, Scotland are strongly pro Europe. They voted to remain. Nicola Sturgeon was over here in the Parliament recently. Do you envisage our Parliament and your committee having bipartisan talks with the Scottish Government to look at maybe finding common ground and establishing a new relationship in a post-Brexit situation? Yeah, we
will deal with anybody we feel is going to be beneficial to Ireland. The fact that we're limited in what we can do and where we can go, the fact that we're an hour away is a huge benefit, I suppose, from an agreement point of view and from a trade point of view. I think we have to be looking at those particular avenues if at all possible. Even though we're going to have to look abroad for extra markets, which is obviously very important, but we're going to have to be able to work the two together. And I think that anybody that is prepared to talk to us, we'd have to talk to them as well.
We wish you well.
Thanks very much, Pat.
Cheers, Pat. Thanks a lot. Okay.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Minister for Agriculture Michael Creed also gave his reaction to the report. He spoke to Patrick Donoghue from the Trade Mission in the Gulf States.
Okay, Minister, just a very quick response to the Ag Committee's findings on Foodwise 2025 yesterday.
Well, I think they rightly identify that Brexit is a challenge. I think where I would have a slight disagreement with them is their assertion, if I understand it correctly, that in some way we should revise our ambition. And I think that's a step too far in my view. That ambition is not mine for the industry. It's not the department's. It's actually the industry's own ambition. And I think what's important is that we constantly check and double check the progress we're making. But I think it is great to have a plan. I chair the implementation committee across all the sectors, dairy, beef, tillage. And yeah, Brexit is a challenge. Well, we're meeting this challenge by in fact being here looking for new market opportunities. And I think, Brexit will pass.
Yes.
And in due course we'll know the consequence of that. But look, we still have a latent capacity to produce more food and to do it as good, if not better, than anybody else in the world. And we will find markets for that.
So you're not going to be pulling in the people who formed Foodwise 2025 to say, look, lads, I think we might have to revise this downwards?
No, I certainly am not. I mean, I work with all of those stakeholders and I say to them, look, every individual farmer is going to have to make an informed decision about their production, and it'll have to be one that makes money for them. And, if the market impact of Brexit is such calamitous consequences that is the case, then we live with that. But I think really what we have, and I've emphasised this point, is a latent capacity which was suppressed for so long in the dairy side because of quotas. We're now beginning to realise our true potential, and there are markets out there for this product, and we're the best in the world at it. We're moving up the value chain, and I think that's really an issue for the industry to decide. Is it something they want to step back from? And in the implementation committee, we deal with all of the roadblocks that are there. Obviously, Brexit is the biggest roadblock that we face, but we may well negotiate a way around that. I'm optimistic that we can, but let's wait and see. It's certainly premature at this stage to say, because of Brexit, we need to be less ambitious.
And finally, just as we walk around Gulf Foods' enormous trade show here in Dubai, 100,000 people coming this week, what are Irish companies saying to you?
All of the Irish companies, bar none, are really engaged here, doing new business, opening up new markets. And like the companies that I've travelled with in the food sector are all here. But others in the ag tech sector are also exploring opportunities. And I think we have to be in places like this. It's imperative if we are to overcome the Brexit challenge. This is where we'll do it.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Pat O'Toole then spoke to Charlie McConalogue, Fianna Fáil's spokesman on agriculture, to get his reaction to the report and to the government's preparations for Brexit in general.
I'm here with Charlie McConalogue, Fianna Fáil spokesman on agriculture. We're reacting to the Brexit report. Just give me your overview, Charlie, of the findings of the committee in relation to where agriculture stands post-Brexit and how Ireland can best position itself.
Yeah, well, I think it's been clear from the outset when the UK made the decision to go with Brexit and the vote was passed. It's been clear that the agri-food sector is the sector in Ireland which is the most exposed and which is the highest risk, faces the highest risk from the fallout from Brexit. So really what the Agriculture Committee undertook was a full scoping exercise to try and identify what the issues are, because really we've been at the stage over the last number of weeks and months where people really have just been trying to get a full grip on what the full implications are, what type of assessments needs to be done to understand the difficulties that have to be addressed over the next year to 2 years. The committee's report today really plays a large part in scoping out the various issues and putting flesh in the bones and trying to identify the challenges that are there and making recommendations as to how we might go about meeting them.
The big fear for Ireland is that we may be fenced out of the UK, but for Donegal, the constituency that you represent, the fear is that Donegal is practically going to be fenced in if we get a hard border, because you share most of your border is with the United Kingdom. So in that regard, is Donegal in the most vulnerable situation of any part of Europe?
I think so, absolutely. or we are underdeveloped and our potential hasn't been tapped in a way that other parts of the country have, because of the fact that we have been geopolitically isolated. We suffered as a result of the Troubles, our proximity to that, the fact that people coming from the south had to travel through the north to get to us, and that was off-putting. It was off-putting for developing our tourism potential. When you look at you contrast Kerry with similar natural resources to us, and how that's developed, and we're only catching up, and also our roads infrastructure and non-existent rail infrastructure, for example, that can only get there if it comes through the north, and it takes. So all of that has been very difficult, and obviously the Troubles were a big part of that, but also the two various different jurisdictions. Now add on to that, we could well be on a European border. So it is very challenging for a county. And then from an agricultural point of view, it's particularly challenging as well, because any downside that there will be to Brexit will be amplified in the border counties, in particular Donegal, because of the very significant cross-border engagement in terms of we're one food island as such. So for processing, for beef, for sheep, for pigs, for milk, significant part of the percentage of the milk from dairy, Tyrone, and Fermanagh comes into Donegal to be processed. So those are big challenges.
There's been a long-standing and close relationship between Donegal and Scotland. Now, unlike Northern Ireland and the UK in general, Scotland voted to remain in the EU. Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister, is strongly pro-Europe, wants to maintain close ties with Europe. Is there an opportunity for Ireland there, and can Donegal lead the way in terms of forging strong links with Scotland in a post-Brexit situation?
Well, I think our key focus needs to be first of all to be in terms of our own 26 county republic interest, in terms of getting an outcome which suits the republic and working to get that message and get that alliances built in Europe to achieve that. But alongside that, our focus needs to be in terms of our cross-borders, or the island issues, because that's really where we're very exposed in terms of our food and the interaction there. Then in terms of our interaction with Britain, that's the tariffs and all that come into it in a significant way in relation to that. But there's much more complicated and much more, practical difficulties in terms of the island of Ireland and how we operate as one island for the purposes of food. So that really there's a lot of work required to make sure that the country gets its head around that, also to make sure that Britain and Northern Ireland push their case, but also Britain understand the Northern Irish case in relation to that, and that they show more of an.
Does Northern Ireland understand its own situation yet?
Listen, I think all the political topsy-turviness and confusion in the north is the last thing that's needed at the moment, because instead of actually them getting knuckled down to dealing with this challenge and to getting their message across, they're in election mode, and the executive has collapsed. That's a big problem in my view. It's a big difficulty, and you have a situation where the DUP campaigned for Brexit. So listen, that is not what you'd want to see in terms of the north actually working to get their message across and make sure that Britain fully understands that and isn't ignoring it, and as I mentioned inside at the reports launch there today, the comments during the week of British Minister for Agriculture Andrea Leadsom, where she indicated that Britain and UK farmers will be better off outside CAP. Listen, that's la la land in terms of agriculture farmers in Northern Ireland, where it poses massive challenges for them, and it shows a very British centric thinking by the UK government, where they're not taking into account the needs of Northern Ireland and the implications in terms of Ireland being one island for the purposes of food. So they need to get full comprehension of that. They need to understand it and make it something which is important to them in terms of their engagement with the European Union. But we need to, because it's very important to us in terms of Republic, and we need to also do our bit to make sure that gets an agenda and that it has importance, that it's given importance by them as well as by the European Union.
Super. Thanks very much, Charlie.
Right.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
Last Friday, the IFA continued its series of regional meetings on the Areas of Natural Constraint Review in Corranmart near Fermoy, County Cork. William Conlon was there for the Irish Farmers Journal, and he spoke to IFA President Joe Healy, dairy farmer John Mullins, and IFA Cork Hill Sheep Chairman Teddy Crean.
William Conlon here at the Irish Farmers Journal. I'm down at the IFA ANC review meeting in Fermoy with IFA President Joe Healy. Joe, what are the IFA hoping to see from these review meetings, and what are they hoping to see legislation come through on the review?
Yeah, well, I think, in a quick answer to your question, we have three main priorities for the ANC review. First of all, we want the areas that are in there to remain inside and remain in a situation where they qualify for ANC payments, and other areas that have hardship or disadvantage that they are brought in through the new criteria. The second part of it is that we want the funding to be restored to pre-2009 levels. For that to happen, we need an extra 50 million in the fund. We took the cuts back in 2009 and they've never been restored. So they need to be restored quickly, because the ANC is all about supporting farmers in the more vulnerable areas and the poorer land areas. And I suppose the final point that the organisation has to see, and is pushing very strongly on it, is that compensation and payment reflects the natural disadvantage or the natural handicap in the area.
I know there's been a lot of meetings up along the western coast that Western farmers are looking for higher payments for the severely disadvantaged areas, and maybe a bigger gap between what the highest and lowest payment currently is. Where would you stand on that?
Yeah, look, we stand on that in our final point there, and that the payment has to reflect the handicap and the disadvantage in an area, and that's where we stand on it, and we make no apology for it, because no matter where we go around the country, and you heard that being talked about in there earlier on tonight at the meeting, and there's a strong feeling that the payment has to reflect the handicap.
And do you believe if the budget is increased that there will be scope there to increase payments while still keeping everyone in it?
I think there will, but there's a lot of water to go under the bridge yet, and a lot of negotiations to go on, and we need to see a budget and then sit down and come up with the best ways of making sure that the people most entitled to it get it. Maybe that means front-loading some of it, or front-loading more of it, and having a higher payment on the first X number of hectares, and then also to look at the particular areas, we'll say the islands, the mountains, the wetter, more boggish type land, and then areas like, but, if you take a disadvantage, we're probably facing into a huge disadvantage here in Ireland, given that depending on the type of Brexit that's there, we're going to be further removed from mainland Europe. I saw a figure the other day where 50% of all the agri-food products that we export to the European mainland travels through the United Kingdom.
I'm here with John Mullins from Mitchelstown. He's a dairy farmer. John, what are your concerns with the review?
I suppose I'd be concerned that people that would have heavy land that would previously been severely disadvantaged would be kicked out of the new ANC payment, even though that it takes a lot of extra money to maintain the land to the quality that they have been farming it up to now, with costs of maintaining open dikes, putting in land drains and fixing land drains every year, on top of the cost of more receding more frequently, because with the heavy land that it gets poached and it just doesn't last in the wet land, and that these costs aren't appreciated by the look of the land.
So you're saying that maybe the level of management that goes into some of the land won't be taken into account in the review, that heavy land that maybe takes an awful lot of management might look good land, but the management that goes on behind the scenes won't be taken into account. That's your kind of concern?
Exactly, the management and even the short grazing window that we have compared to the better lands around the country that might look equally as good, but would have maybe 60 extra days grazing in the year.
I'm here with Teddy Crean, the Cork Hill sheep rep for the IFA. Teddy, what kind of changes are you looking for in the review?
I suppose the most important changes is to reverse the cuts that was imposed on us, and I suppose then we would like to see an increase in our payments. I suppose our idea in IFA is as we should get up to €6,000 for all head sheep farmers in the upcoming review.
And would you be looking for a larger split, say, between severely disadvantaged areas and maybe less disadvantaged areas?
Yeah, I think this is the only way it will work, and it's I don't mean by splitting it, making it a lesser payment for the hills. I mean it should be a larger payment for the worst ground, and I definitely think it's very important to pay up to 45 hectares to make that difference.
especially in hill areas.
Especially in hill areas, because it's you're left with a lot of cost of maintenance, particularly in fencing and rush control and all to that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ellie.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
On Tuesday this week, the EU Commissioners for Agriculture and Trade launched a study carried out by Copenhagen Economics on the impact of trade agreements on agriculture. Surprisingly, the report found that EU agriculture benefits from trade deals rather than being adversely affected by them. Market specialist Phelim O'Neill sat down with Liam McHale, Director of the IFA Brussels office, to talk about the findings.
Okay, I'm joined by Liam McHale, IFA Director in the Brussels office, and we're going to delve a little deeper into the Copenhagen Economics report that was launched today by Commissioners Hogan and Malmström in Brussels. It suggests briefly that EU agriculture actually benefits from trade deals rather than being an impediment. Liam, I noticed that COPA, the organisation, the European Farm Organisation that IFA are part of, they seem to have endorsed this report. Would IFA, do you think, be happy with the general thrust of the Copenhagen Economics report?
Thanks very much, Phelim. I think all reports on trade can be approached from perhaps two angles. Of course there are benefits, and the Commission will point to €1 billion increase in exports to these countries, 20,000 new jobs. But if we look at Ireland's position, and specifically the trade deals that they're looking at are Switzerland, South Korea and Mexico. While there have been benefits to us, they're pretty much in line with the increase of our general exports if we look at the increase from 2001 up to 2015. And the benefit to the EU, of course, is jobs, 20,000 new jobs. But do remember that in the same period there's been a consolidation and a contraction within agriculture, within the whole sector. We've lost over 1/4 of the farms in Europe over that period, with the resulting unemployment associated with that. So the benefits from trade are really offsetting only in a small way some of those losses.
So we've been given on one hand and taken away on the other, you could say, to some extent.
Yeah, I would certainly say that. And if we look at the trade done with these countries, while we have benefited within the EU, it is also noticeable that the imports into the EU from these countries has grown faster, at a faster rate than our exports to their countries.
So that'll be a concern to farmers then across Europe, not just in Ireland?
Sure, because if we look at the lower priced products that are coming into the EU, there's a huge displacement effect there. And that is one of our main concerns, particularly in our big export sectors, beef and dairy, that our products will be displaced in the European market by incoming products from these countries.
I suppose, taking it in the context, and before Christmas we had the cumulative impact assessment that was carried out by the JRC of the European Commission at the behest of the Agriculture Commission. It would have identified, I suppose, that all sectors of agriculture were potentially okay in the context of trade deals, even with the likes of Mercosur, but there was no doubt about it that the beef sector was the one that was exposed almost in any trade deal with a major beef exporting nation.
That's right. If you were to place these two reports side to side, you would see two very different stories, as I've pointed out. The potential damage to the beef sector is well known, and the cumulative impact report highlighted that within the Commission, because DG Agriculture, of course, they are very familiar with that, but highlighting the importance in our negotiation strategy that we've got to protect those sectors. While there are benefits, and Ireland included within dairy in some of these export markets, there's a huge threat across other areas, and that needs to be kept in mind in any trade deal going forward.
No doubt the IFA will be well switched on to these concerns, and you yourself highlighted a number of these here. Are you confident that COPA, the EU farm-based organisation that represents essentially a number of farming unions from across Europe and made up of a number of those, do you feel that they are on message in this as well, that they will have to share the same concerns that you have just expressed?
Obviously, when you're representing an organisation representing 28 member states, if you look at the bottom line, there are positive benefits, and we do acknowledge that. And if we are to meet our Foodwise 2025 targets in expanding the agri-food export category, we too will need to be part of these bilateral deals. But what I would point out is that what we need to do is address the issues that are holding back our development of the trade once the agreement has been sorted. And what I mean by that is any of the SPS, the health and welfare issues, the non-tariff barriers, things that are holding back our access. And, for example, we look at, say, for example, pig meat into Mexico. While the deal with South Korea has seen us climb to, the South Korean market is our 9th biggest export market now for pig meat. While we look at Switzerland, the beef sector, our exports there are the 10th highest export market for Ireland. There are huge gaps across, even within these 3 trade deals that are included within this Copenhagen Economics Report, there are huge big gaps that need to be addressed. And we know that development of trade is a long-term proposition. You've got to get in there, establish your network, establish your distribution. You've got to develop a reputation, and we've seen that doesn't happen overnight. So it is important for Irish exporters that in these trade missions that the EU is participating in, and Commissioner Hogan was in Mexico before, during last year, and he is now embarking on a series of others since 2017. We need to be part of those, to actually embrace and actually take advantage of the deals that are being signed.
So you basically embrace trade in principle, but you urge caution in terms of exposure of the European market to external suppliers that can undermine us.
Yes, and that is the message that we continually communicate here, both within the COPA, amongst our other farming associations, and within the Commission.
Liam McHale, IFA Brussels office, thank you very much.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app, and on iTunes every Thursday.
And finally this week, Mary Phelan, careers editor with Irish Country Living, talks to Ciara Leahy about the graduate programme with Fifes, which will be exhibiting at this year's Agri-Careers Fair and has places in 2017 for up to 10 graduates.
Hi, my name is Ciara Leahy from Irish Country Living, and I'm here with our careers editor, Mary Phelan. Now, if anybody is around the Farmers Journal offices around this time, there is a buzz in the air because we are just 1 month to go to our Agri-Careers Fair. So there's a lot of talk about careers going on at the moment. In this week's Irish Country Living, Mary has an article about one particularly exotic exhibitor who has jobs on offer. Mary, can you tell us about that?
Yes, Ciara. So this week I've written about Fifes. Fifes are exhibiting at our Agri-Careers Fair. They're
Fifes the bananas.
Well, did you know that Fifes do a lot more than bananas? So they're known for their bananas, but they actually supply a huge amount of melons and pineapples as well. So actually the graduate that we have a picture of in the paper this week, Declan O'Neill, is holding a pineapple in his hands, not a bunch of bananas.
Very interesting.
Yes. They also have mushrooms, actually. They bought 2 mushroom facilities in Canada in 2016. So there's some interesting information for you. But Fifes are exhibiting at the Agri-Careers Fair. They're actually launching their graduate programme at our Agri-Careers Fair, the 2017 programme. And what's actually really interesting about Fifes' graduate programme is that they also launched it at the Agri-Careers Fair last year. They got 700 applicants altogether. Now they actually cut off, they would have received more, but they just threw a line at 700. They interviewed 22. They took 12 on eventually, and 8 of those they met at the Agri-Careers Fair.
Wow, so that is a big proportion of graduates that were at the fair that got through.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you didn't believe us before when we said it was worth your while coming, I hope you believe us now.
So tell us a little about the programme, Mary.
So it's primarily based in Central America, so in countries like Panama, Belize and Costa Rica. This is where the farms that grow all the exotic fruits, like bananas and melons and pineapples, this is where they're based. So it's a 2-year graduate programme. It has a maximum of 4 training and development placements, which each take 6 months. And at the end of the 2-year period, the objective then is, if the graduates are successful on the programme, that they will be given permanent jobs. Now, some of those people might be given jobs kind of long term on the farms, but there are also opportunities in kind of the more corporate side of the business, I suppose. Graduates can also get jobs in areas such as auditing, compliance and corporate social responsibility with Fifes.
Mary, can we just backtrack it just a small bit there? So all those exotic locations in South America, etc., that you mentioned,
More Central America.
Are the graduates actually based there for 6 months?
They're there for 2 years.
For 2 years.
As far as I know.
So it's a great opportunity for students that really want to travel and get out and see the world as well.
Yes, but you have to be willing to rough it a little bit. And what I mean by that is you're not necessarily going to have Wi-Fi on the farms if you want to Skype. So William Faulkner is who I interviewed from Fifes. He's their HR manager, and he was saying there's no Skype, or there is Skype, but you have to go up to the top of the mountain to get signal. So it is a brilliant opportunity to travel and to see these really exotic parts of the world and to really immerse yourself in these countries. But, you know, it's not like living in Ireland, basically.
No, absolutely. But I suppose if you're a young student and you want to go see the world, it means that you're not putting your career on hold. You're getting out there, you're travelling, but you're also progressing your career, and you don't have a year gap on your CV or anything.
Exactly, yeah. You're ticking 2 boxes. The interesting thing about this programme is that you're placed with a local family, because Fifes are quite keen that your Spanish comes up to speed. But William Faulkner told me, he's the HR manager with Fifes, and he mentioned that the graduates really like this because they get their clothes washed and they get their meals cooked for them.
Great, so that's the best of both worlds. Okay, Mary, so this obviously could be a very attractive graduate course for students. What kind of students are Fifes looking for?
So in terms of an academic background, they would like someone with a degree in agriculture or a degree in horticulture, or even a degree in agricultural engineering. They took on 2 graduates last year from IT Tralee who had qualifications in ag engineering. This is because there's lots of machinery and equipment out on the farms, so you'd be working on those. But what they actually value more is your personality, and really in terms of personality they want someone who's resilient.
Okay.
Really resilient. They do psychometric tests and they do behavioural profiling to actually see what you're made of in terms of your personality, because as I mentioned already, there is no Wi-Fi. Not that there's no Wi-Fi. A lot of the time there isn't Wi-Fi. Your phone mightn't work. Working in the tropics can be lonely. You mightn't have another Irish person near to you. You might be on the farm with local people, you might have people who are speaking a lot of English around you. So they really want people who can demonstrate that they've already put themselves out of their comfort zone, who have maybe experience living abroad. And abroad, they don't mean that you went to Birmingham for a weekend, and that's an example that William Faulkner used. If you can show that you've already lived in a very rural and remote region abroad, that would really stand to you. William Faulkner also said to me that he wants people to come up and not ask him what he does, but tell him what he does. So go and do your own research. He said when he was a young guy, he didn't have the internet, he had to go to a library. He said it's all out there, so make sure you know what you're talking about. This is even if you approach them at the fair, I guess you'd be putting yourselves at an advantage. And he also mentioned that they welcome mature students or career changers because they bring a different perspective and they have experience, so they would be quite interested in that as well.
Excellent. Mary, just before we finish up, could we just, we've been talking about the Agri Careers Fair, could we just, I suppose, give our readers just a recap of what it's all about?
So the Agri Careers Fair brings agri employers from right across the industry together under the one roof on the 30th of March in the RDS. They will have jobs to fill, and we want to bring people into the hall on the day who are looking for jobs. It's your opportunity, just like I've been speaking about with Fifes there, and if you read my pages over coming weeks, you're going to be getting hints and tidbits about how you can actually impress the employers on the day. So it's about going up to them with your CV. A lot of people last year were dressed quite smartly. They came in their suit and tie. They meant business. They had a lot of CVs with them. So really, it's a first point of contact for you to make a really good impression on an employer that you would like to work with who has real live roles available on the day. We had a lot of secondary school students at the event last year, so we're catering specifically for them with a school zone. That will have a main stage in it with lots of speakers who will be talking about the Ag Science paper, giving career guidance advice, and there'll be a bit of fun and crack in there as well. We also have a specialist hub where our expert writers from the main section of the paper will be talking about careers in farming itself. Across the different sectors, beef, sheep, tillage, etc. And then we of course have the main stage on the day where we will have a lot of people who have already established their careers in the agri sector talking about how they got there, and then also discussing issues in their sector. So at the moment, for example, in the ag machinery sector, there is a labour crisis really in terms of skilled people available to do the work, so those kind of things will be discussed on stage. So it'll be a very interesting and useful day all around.
Absolutely. And I suppose no matter what stage in your career you're at, whether you're a secondary school student or you're a graduate or looking for a career move, you're going to benefit from the day. Thanks very much, Mary, and all the details are in this week's Irish Country Living.
Yes, Ciara, read all about it in this week's paper.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.